At Christmas dinner, my family locked the dining room before I arrived. I stood on the front porch holding a warm pecan pie in one hand and a gift bag filled with presents in the other. Through the frosted glass beside the front door, I could hear laughter. Glasses clinked. Christmas music drifted through the house I had visited every December for more than 20 years. I knocked. No one answered. I knocked again, this time a little louder. The laughter didn't stop. I waited another minute before reaching for the doorknob. It was locked. I checked it twice, convinced I had made a mistake. I hadn't. My own son had invited me to Christmas dinner. Yet somehow, I was standing outside in 30-degree weather while everyone else celebrated without me. I simply smiled, turned around, and walked back to my car. What my family didn't know was that before the next Christmas arrived, every secret they had tried so hard to hide would come crashing into the light. I'm glad you're here. Stay with me until the end, and let me know which city you're watching from. I'd truly love to see how far this story travels. Christmas had always been my favorite day of the year. Not because of the gifts, not because of the decorations. It was because Christmas was the one day when I believed every family could set aside their disagreements, gather around the same table, and remember what truly mattered. My late husband, Edwin Harrow, used to say our dining room wasn't built with wood and nails. It was built with memories. He'd tell me every December, as he carried another box of ornaments down from the attic. I still hear those words whenever I smell fresh pine or cinnamon. Edwin had been gone for 9 months. The silence he left behind still echoed through every room of my little colonial house in Hartford, Connecticut. Some mornings I caught myself making 2 cups of coffee before remembering there was only me. Some evenings I reached for the television remote just to fill the unbearable quiet. Grief doesn't always arrive like a storm. Sometimes it settles into the empty chair across the table. Sometimes it hides inside an untouched coffee mug. Sometimes it waits until Christmas. This year, however, I had promised myself things would be different. Tristan had called 3 weeks earlier. "Mom," he'd said warmly, "Simone and I are hosting Christmas dinner this year. We'd really love for you to come." Those words meant more than he could possibly know. Since Edwin's funeral, family gatherings had slowly changed. Birthday dinners were shorter. Sunday lunches disappeared. Phone calls became text messages. Text messages became silence. I tried convincing myself everyone was simply busy. Life moved quickly for younger people. That was what I kept telling myself. Still, I wanted to believe Christmas would bring us back together. So I prepared exactly the way I always had. I spent 2 days baking. Pecan pie for Tristan. Pumpkin cheesecake for Simone because she'd once mentioned liking it. Sugar cookies shaped like little snowflakes for my granddaughter Marin. I wrapped every present carefully using the same silver paper Edwin and I had bought years ago after Christmas clearance sales. Old habits have a way of surviving heartbreak. That afternoon, I stood in front of my bedroom mirror longer than usual. At 69, I no longer worried about looking elegant, but I wanted to look like myself, the woman my family had always known, the woman who had hosted nearly every Christmas dinner for over 3 decades. I chose a deep emerald sweater Edwin always complimented. Simple pearl earrings, a tiny silver brooch shaped like a holly leaf. Before leaving, I looked at Edwin's photograph sitting on the mantel. "Wish me luck," I whispered with a small smile. The drive took just under 30 minutes. Snow had begun falling lightly, dusting rooftops and bare maple branches. Children laughed somewhere nearby as they pulled sleds across front yards. Everything looked exactly like the Christmases I remembered. By the time I pulled into Tristan's driveway, every parking space was full. My sister-in-law's SUV, Simone's parents' luxury sedan, 2 cars belonging to neighbors. Everyone was already there. That made me smile. I picked up the pie, the presents, smoothed my coat, walked carefully toward the front porch. Before I even reached the door, I could hear everyone laughing inside. For one brief moment, I imagined Edwin standing beside me. "Go on?" I could almost hear him say, "They're waiting for you." I believed him, until I reached for the doorknob. I wrapped my fingers around the cold brass doorknob and tried it again. Locked. For a few seconds, I simply stood there, listening. Christmas music floated through the house. Someone laughed so hard they nearly choked. Glasses clinked together. The smell of roasted turkey drifted through the small gap beneath the front door. Everything about the evening sounded warm. Everything except the place where I was standing. I knocked one more time. This time, I heard footsteps. They stopped just on the other side of the door. I smiled, expecting it to open. Instead, the footsteps slowly walked away. No one spoke. No one opened the door. I looked down at the pie, still warming my hands inside its insulated carrier. The whipped cream I'd packed in a small cooler suddenly felt ridiculous. I had spent hours making everything from scratch because Christmas dinners had always mattered to me. Apparently, they didn't matter the same way to everyone else. The wind brushed across the porch, carrying tiny snowflakes onto my coat. I glanced through the narrow window beside the entrance. The curtains weren't completely closed. Just enough remained open for me to catch a glimpse. Tristan was carving the turkey. Simone stood beside him, smiling as she filled wine glasses. Marin sat quietly near the end of the table. For a brief second, our eyes almost met. Before I could lift my hand to wave, Simone reached over and pulled the curtain shut. The house disappeared behind thick red fabric. I don't remember feeling angry. Not then. Only strangely, invisible. After nearly 40 years of putting family first, I had somehow become someone who could be left outside without explanation. I carefully placed the pie on the porch swing. Then I picked it up again. No, Edwin had taught me never to leave homemade food sitting in freezing weather. Some habits stay with you, even after the people who taught them are gone. I carried everything back to my car. As I started the engine, Christmas music filled the radio. I turned it off immediately. The silence felt kinder. The drive home seemed longer than 30 minutes. Snow fell more heavily now, covering the streets in white. Families crossed intersections carrying wrapped presents. Children pointed excitedly at brightly decorated houses. At every red light, I found myself wondering whether Tristan had noticed I was gone, whether Marin had asked where Grandma was, whether anyone had even realized I'd been standing outside. By the time I pulled into my driveway, darkness had settled over the neighborhood. The little wreath hanging on my front door looked lonelier than I remembered. I unlocked the house and stepped inside. The silence welcomed me before anything else did. No voices, no laughter, only the quiet hum of the furnace working against the December cold. I set the presents beneath my own Christmas tree, one by one. Tristan's gift, Simone's gift, Marin's gift, each tag written carefully in my handwriting. I stared at them for several seconds before removing my coat. The house still smelled faintly of cinnamon from the cookies I'd baked that morning. On the kitchen counter sat an extra serving dish I'd forgotten to bring. I smiled to myself. For 35 years, Edwin used to tease me about always cooking enough food for twice the number of guests. You prepare for people, he'd laugh. You prepare for miracles. I hadn't understood what he meant back then. Tonight, his words returned to me differently. Sometimes the miracle isn't that people come. Sometimes it's discovering who never intended to. I made myself a cup of hot tea instead of opening the bottle of wine I'd planned to share with everyone. Then I carried the mug into the living room and lowered myself into Edwin's old armchair. His photograph rested on the bookshelf nearby. Same warm smile. Same kind eyes. I looked at him for a long time. I don't understand, I whispered. The words sounded louder than I expected inside the empty room. I wasn't asking why the door had been locked. I was asking something much deeper. When had I stopped belonging? When had family gatherings become events I attended, instead of moments I helped create? When had my son become a man who could leave his mother standing in the snow? Questions have a way of multiplying once they begin. Around 8 that evening, my phone finally vibrated. My heart lifted before I even looked at the screen. It was Tristan. I answered immediately. Hi, sweetheart. There was a short pause. Then he said something that made every piece of the evening suddenly feel much less like a misunderstanding and much more like a choice. Hi, sweetheart. For a moment I closed my eyes. Just hearing Tristan's voice brought back memories of scraped knees, school concerts, bedtime stories, and every Christmas morning when he'd run downstairs before sunrise, convinced Santa had come while he slept. No matter how old our children become, part of us always hears the little boy they used to be. Mom, he said quietly, I'm sorry you missed dinner. Missed dinner. Those 2 words settled heavily in my chest. Not, I'm sorry you were left outside. Not, I'm sorry we locked the door. Just, missed dinner. I was there, Tristan. Silence. I knocked. Another silence. I know. His answer came so quickly that I didn't even have time to process it. You knew? Simone thought it would be better if we talked afterward. I stared across my living room at the lights on my Christmas tree. Their soft glow reflected in the window beside me. Outside, snow continued falling. Inside, everything suddenly felt much colder. What exactly needed to wait until afterward? He let out a long breath. You've been having a difficult year, Mom. I've been grieving. I know. And Christmas is supposed to be spent with family. I know. Every answer sounded rehearsed. Every pause sounded familiar. I'd heard those pauses before, not just tonight. Over the past year, whenever plans changed, whenever invitations arrived late, whenever Simone spoke first and Tristan spoke second, he used to make decisions without hesitation. Now every sentence felt as though someone else had approved it first. We didn't want tonight to become emotional, he continued. Everyone was already here. Simone thought it might be easier if we spoke privately later. I almost smiled, not because anything was funny, because I finally understood something that had been confusing me for months. No one accidentally locks a front door during Christmas dinner. Someone makes that decision. Someone keeps it locked. Someone hears the knocking and chooses silence. I see, I said. You understand? More than you realize. He sounded relieved. I knew you'd understand. Those words stayed with me long after we ended the call. He thought I understood their decision. But what I actually understood was something entirely different. I understood that being excluded hadn't been an accident. It had been organized. I carried my empty teacup into the kitchen. The presents still sat beneath my Christmas tree, neatly wrapped, untouched. I knelt beside them and gently straightened the ribbon on Marin's gift. She had asked for a sketchbook months ago, not an expensive one, just one with thick paper because she wanted to learn watercolor painting. She reminded me so much of Edwin, quiet, observant, never the loudest person in the room, but always the one who noticed everything. I wondered what she'd been thinking while I stood outside. Had she known? Or had someone told her I wasn't coming? The thought lingered with me long after midnight. Sleep never came. Instead, memories did. Small memories. The kind you ignore because each one seems too insignificant on its own. Last Easter, Simone had changed lunch from noon to 2 o'clock. Somehow, I hadn't been told until after everyone had already eaten. Thanksgiving before that. I arrived with homemade rolls only to hear they'd decided to order catering instead. Simone laughed and said, "Oh, we completely forgot to mention it." Forgot. Such a harmless little word. Anniversaries, birthdays, weekend barbecues. There was always an explanation, always a misunderstanding, always some tiny mistake. I'd accepted every one of them because believing my family loved me was easier than asking difficult questions. Lying awake that Christmas night, I realized something unsettling. Every misunderstanding had one thing in common. They always left me on the outside. Never anyone else. Just me. The next morning I woke before sunrise. The house was quiet except for the ticking of the grandfather clock Edwin had inherited from his father. I made coffee, opened the curtains, watched fresh snow cover yesterday's footprints. For the first time in months, I wasn't trying to excuse anyone's behavior. That felt strangely peaceful. Around 9 o'clock, my phone buzzed. A text message from Simone. "Hope you made it home safely. Sorry about the confusion yesterday. We were just trying to keep things simple." I read it twice. Simple. Locking an elderly widow outside on Christmas Day was being described as keeping things simple. I didn't reply, not because I wanted to punish anyone, because I suddenly realized something Edwin used to tell me whenever business negotiations became difficult. The person who speaks first usually gives away more than they should. So I stayed silent. About an hour later, there was a gentle knock at my front door. This time, when I opened it, someone was standing there who would change everything I believed about what had really happened at Christmas dinner. There stood Marin. She was bundled in a navy winter coat, a knitted scarf wrapped twice around her neck, her cheeks pink from the cold. Snowflakes rested on the top of her wool hat, slowly melting as she looked up at me. "Grandma." Her voice was barely above a whisper. I smiled automatically. "Come inside, sweetheart. You'll freeze out there." She stepped into the house, carefully wiping her boots on the mat, the way Edwin had always taught her. Even after all these years, seeing someone respect our little traditions warmed my heart. "You've gotten taller," I said, hanging her coat. She gave me a small smile. "So have you." I laughed softly. I don't think that's possible at 69. For the first time since Christmas Eve, I heard genuine laughter inside my home. It only lasted a second. Then the silence returned. "Would you like some hot chocolate?" I asked. She nodded. "Please." I carried 2 mugs into the kitchen. The familiar routine settled my nerves. Milk, a spoonful of cocoa, a little vanilla, just enough cinnamon to remind us it was still Christmas. Marin sat quietly at the kitchen table, watching me without saying much. She had always been like that. When she was little, she preferred coloring books over cartoons. She listened more than she talked. Edwin used to say she had old eyes that noticed things adults thought children missed. When I placed the mug in front of her, she wrapped both hands around it but didn't take a sip. Instead, she looked down. "I'm sorry." The words caught me by surprise. "For what?" "For yesterday." "Oh, sweetheart. You knocked." My heart skipped. "You heard me?" She nodded slowly. I was sitting at the end of the table. I didn't answer. I wanted her to continue. I got up. She swallowed. I was going to open the door. My fingers tightened around my own mug. What happened? Marin stared into the hot chocolate. Mom told me to sit down. The kitchen became very quiet. I said maybe you couldn't open the door because your hands were full. She blinked several times before continuing. Mom looked at Dad. And? Dad didn't say anything. Those 5 words hurt more than anything Simone could have said herself. Dad didn't say anything. I had spent all night wondering whether Tristan knew I was outside. Now I had my answer. He hadn't simply known. He had watched. "What did your mother say?" I asked gently. Marin hesitated. "I don't want to get anyone in trouble." "You're not getting anyone in trouble." Another long pause. Finally she looked up. She said, Marin's voice became almost inaudible, "If we let her in now, she'll make the whole evening about herself." I closed my eyes. Not because I wanted to escape the words, because I wanted to remember them exactly as they were. Every syllable, every excuse. There would be no pretending later that I had misunderstood. Marin reached across the table and took my hand. I wanted to open the door. "I know. I really did. I know you did." Tears gathered in her eyes. "I don't understand why everyone is acting like this." Neither did I, at least, not until recently. "When did things start changing?" I asked quietly. She frowned. "I don't know. Think carefully." She leaned back in her chair. "I guess." She stopped. "Since Grandpa died." I had been afraid of that answer. After Edwin's funeral, grief had occupied so much of my heart that I hadn't noticed everything happening around me. I had assumed distance came from everyone's sadness. Perhaps it came from something else entirely. Marin looked toward the living room. "Grandpa always made everyone be nice." I smiled sadly. "Yes. He'd stop people if they were being mean." "That's true. He always said family meals weren't about food." I laughed softly through the ache in my chest. "He said they were about making sure nobody ever ate alone." She smiled. "He told me that too." For a moment, it felt as though Edwin was sitting with us. Not as a memory, as a presence, still quietly teaching us both. Marin reached into her coat pocket. I almost forgot. She pulled out a small white envelope. "I think you should have this." "What is it?" "I found it yesterday." "Where?" She looked uneasy. "In Mom's home office." I didn't move. I wasn't snooping. "I know you weren't. I was looking for wrapping paper." She placed the envelope on the table between us. "It has your name on it. My name. Written in Edwin's unmistakable handwriting." The room suddenly felt smaller. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. I gently turned the envelope over. The seal had never been broken. A faint layer of dust clung to one corner, as though it had been sitting untouched for months. "When did you find this?" I asked. "Right before dinner." My heartbeat slowed, not raced, slowed. The kind of stillness that comes just before the truth begins to reveal itself. I looked back at Marin. "Did anyone know you took it?" She shook her head. "I don't think so." I carefully ran my thumb across Edwin's familiar handwriting. For Celeste. Nothing more. No date. No explanation. Just my name. Outside, snow continued falling in complete silence. Inside, I realized Christmas dinner might never have been the real story. Perhaps the locked dining room had only been a distraction from something they never wanted me to find. I held the envelope in both hands for several long moments. Edwin's handwriting had always been unmistakable. Neat. Patient. Every letter carefully formed, as though he believed even handwriting reflected a person's character. For over 40 years, I'd seen those same graceful strokes on birthday cards, grocery lists, anniversary notes, and little reminders he left beside the coffee maker whenever he traveled for work. Seeing them now felt like hearing his voice again. Marin watched me quietly. "Aren't you going to open it?" "I will." I smiled gently. "But not while my hands are shaking." She looked down at her mug and nodded. "I understand." I wasn't afraid of what might be inside. I was afraid of what it might confirm. Very carefully, I slid my finger beneath the flap. The seal gave way with a soft tear. Inside was a folded sheet of cream-colored stationery. Nothing else. No legal documents. No photographs. Just one handwritten letter. I unfolded it slowly. The first line immediately blurred through unexpected tears. "My dearest Celeste." I stopped reading. Not because I wanted to, because hearing Edwin call me my dearest Celeste after 9 months felt almost unbearable. I closed my eyes for a second before continuing. "If you're reading this, then something has happened that convinced you to look for answers instead of excuses. I hope I'm wrong. I truly do. But after all these years in business, I've learned that grief often changes people, and money changes them even faster." I felt my heartbeat slow. Edwin wasn't accusing anyone. That wasn't his way. He was simply telling me what he had quietly observed. I continued reading. "You have spent your entire life believing the best about people. That's one of the reasons I fell in love with you. But sometimes kindness needs the protection of wisdom." Those words sounded exactly like him. Whenever I apologized for trusting someone too easily, Edwin never criticized me. He would simply smile and say, "Never stop being kind, Celeste. Just learn who deserves it." I hadn't thought about that sentence in years. Now it returned as clearly as if he were standing beside me. Marin remained silent while I read. She understood some moments belonged entirely to the person living them. The next paragraph made me pause again. "If our family is still treating you with the love and respect you deserve, burn this letter after reading it, and remember me with a smile. If they are not, then call Victor Ellery before making any important decision. Promise me that." Victor, our attorney, Edwin's oldest friend. I looked at Marin. "Did you know your grandfather wrote letters?" She shook her head. "No, neither did I." I looked back down. There was only one paragraph left. "Don't argue. Don't defend yourself. Don't chase people who are willing to leave you behind. The truth has a way of arriving on its own. Victor knows everything that needs to be done. I love you. Always. Edwin." The room became completely silent. Not an empty silence, a peaceful one, as though Edwin had reached across time, simply to remind me I wasn't facing this alone. I folded the letter carefully. Not once, twice, exactly the way he used to fold every important document. Marin finally spoke. "What does it mean?" "I'm not completely sure, but Grandpa wanted you to see it." "Yes." She hesitated. "Who's Victor?" "Our lawyer. The one Grandpa always had lunch with?" I smiled. "You remember him? He always gave me peppermint candies." I laughed softly. "That's him." She leaned forward. "Are you going to call him?" I looked toward the window. Fresh snow continued covering the yard. Every footprint from yesterday had disappeared. Nature had erased the evidence. Life rarely did. "Yes," I answered. "I think it's time." Marin looked relieved. "So, you're not mad?" The question surprised me. "Mad at who?" "Mom. Your dad. Everyone." I thought about it honestly. I was. I wrapped both hands around my tea. "But anger doesn't help us see clearly." She nodded as though she wanted to believe that. "I just want to understand." "So do I." She looked down again. "Grandma?" "Yes?" "I heard something else yesterday." I waited. It was before everyone sat down. "What did you hear?" "I was upstairs getting my phone." She lowered her voice instinctively. "I heard Mom talking in her office." "To who?" "I don't know. I only heard part of it." My attention sharpened. "What did she say?" Marin repeated the words slowly, trying not to change them. "Don't worry. Once she signs everything after the holidays." She stopped. I couldn't hear the rest. A chill ran through me. Signs everything. I searched my memory. No appointments, no paperwork, nothing requiring my signature. At least, nothing that I knew about. What happened next? I walked downstairs. Mom saw me. She stopped talking. I nodded slowly. Children notice far more than adults realize, not because they're suspicious, because they're honest. They don't yet know which truths people prefer to hide. I reached across the table and squeezed Marin's hand. "You've already helped me more than you know. I don't want our family to fall apart." Neither did I. For decades, I had done everything possible to keep this family together. Maybe that had been my mistake. Sometimes holding something together too tightly allows the cracks underneath to grow unnoticed. After Marin left that afternoon, I walked her to the front door. She hugged me longer than usual. "I love you, Grandma." "I love you too, sweetheart." I watched until her father's SUV disappeared around the corner. Then I closed the door. The house became quiet once again. I walked back into the living room. Edwin's letter rested on the coffee table beside his photograph. I picked up my phone, strolled through my contacts. There, exactly where it had always been, Victor Ellery. My thumb hovered above his name for only a second. Then I pressed call. Something told me that conversation would explain far more than why a dining room door had been locked on Christmas Eve. Victor answered before the second ring. "Celeste?" His voice carried the same calm steadiness I remembered. "It's been too long." "It has," I replied. For a moment, neither of us spoke. He had attended Edwin's funeral. He had stood beside me through every legal document, every signature, every decision I was barely able to understand, while grief clouded my mind. "I'm sorry to call the day after Christmas," I said. "Don't apologize." There was a brief pause. "Did you find the letter?" My breath caught. "You knew about it." I did. I glanced toward Edwin's folded note resting on the coffee table. "So you expected I'd eventually read it. I hoped you never would." His answer surprised me. "I hoped your family would prove Edwin wrong." Silence settled between us. Neither of us needed to explain what that meant. "I think he may have been right," I whispered. Victor didn't interrupt. He never had. Edwin used to joke that Victor could listen longer than anyone he'd ever met. Finally, he asked one simple question. "What happened?" I told him everything. The invitation, the presents, the locked front door, the unanswered knocking, the phone call from Tristan, Marin's visit, the envelope, the words Simone had spoken. I didn't exaggerate. I didn't leave anything out. When I finished, Victor let out a slow breath. "I'm very sorry, Celeste." "So am I. I wish I could tell you I'm surprised." That sentence lingered in the air. "You aren't?" "No." I frowned. "What do you mean?" He chose his words carefully. About 6 months before Edwin passed away, he asked me to prepare several documents. I listened without moving. He wasn't worried about his health. He was worried about you. I felt my fingers tighten around the edge of the sofa. He noticed changes. "What kind of changes?" Victor hesitated. "The way Simone handled conversations. The way Tristan stopped making decisions without looking at her first. The way family gatherings slowly began revolving around convenience instead of kindness." Those observations sounded painfully familiar. "They seemed small at the time," Victor continued, "but Edwin had excellent instincts. He said something to me I'll never forget." "What?" Victor's voice softened. He said, "If Celeste ever becomes an inconvenience instead of family, promise me she won't have to face it alone." I looked toward Edwin's photograph. Even now, he had been trying to protect me. I never knew. He didn't want you to. Why? Because he wanted you to continue loving your family without suspicion. That sounded exactly like Edwin. He had always believed trust should be preserved for as long as possible, but never at the cost of truth. "There was one more thing," Victor said. "What?" "He asked me not to contact you unless you called first." "So you've been waiting?" "Yes, for almost a year." The weight of that answer settled heavily over me. Victor hadn't forgotten. He had simply honored Edwin's wishes. "I think it's time we met," he said. "I agree. Can you come by my office tomorrow morning?" "What time?" 10 o'clock. "I'll be there." Before ending the call, Victor added something unexpected. "Bring Edwin's letter." "I will. And don't sign anything." The words immediately brought Marin's memory rushing back. "Once she signs everything after the holidays." My heartbeat slowed. "Victor." "Yes?" "I heard something yesterday." I repeated exactly what Marin had overheard in Simone's office. Victor became very quiet. Long enough that I checked my phone to make sure the call hadn't disconnected. Finally, he spoke. "Has anyone asked you to attend a family meeting?" "No." "Has anyone mentioned updating paperwork?" "No." "Has Tristan asked you to come over this week?" I thought for a moment. No. Then they probably haven't made their move yet. My stomach tightened. Their move? I'd rather explain everything in person. "Is it serious?" "I believe it could become serious." He paused. "But only if you continue believing everything is exactly as it appears." After we ended the call, I remained seated for several minutes. The house felt different now. Not frightening, clearer. For months, I had been asking myself one question. Why would my family lock me out on Christmas? Now another question had taken its place. What were they trying so hard to keep me from seeing? The following morning arrived gray and quiet. I dressed more carefully than usual. Not because I wanted to impress anyone, because Edwin had always believed difficult conversations deserved dignity. I chose a navy wool coat, simple pearl earrings, the same silver brooch I'd worn on Christmas Eve. Before leaving, I slipped Edwin's letter into my handbag. As I reached for my car keys, my phone vibrated. A message from Tristan. Mom, Simone and I were thinking maybe everyone could come over this Saturday. We need to discuss a few things as a family. I read it twice, then a third time. We need to discuss a few things. Not, how are you feeling? Not, can we apologize? Just, a few things. I remembered Victor's warning. Don't sign anything. I looked out the front window. Snow had finally stopped falling. The roads were clear. Whatever waited for me at Victor Ellery's office. I had the unmistakable feeling it would explain exactly why my family suddenly wanted another meeting. I arrived at Victor Ellery's office 10 minutes early. Some habits never leave you. Edwin believed arriving early showed respect, not only for other people's time, but for your own character. Even now, I could almost hear him saying it as I parked my car beneath a row of bare maple trees dusted with fresh snow. Victor's office occupied the second floor of a brick building overlooking Hartford's old courthouse. Edwin had brought me here dozens of times over the years, though I rarely paid attention to legal meetings. That had always been his world. Mine had been our home, our family. Looking back, I realized how willingly I had trusted him to carry responsibilities I never imagined I would one day shoulder alone. Victor himself opened the office door before I reached the reception desk. Celeste, he offered a warm smile. It's good to see you. You too. He shook my hand gently. You look stronger than I expected. I don't know if I am. You came. I did. Sometimes that's the hardest part. His office looked exactly as I remembered. Dark walnut bookshelves, framed degrees, a grandfather clock quietly marking the passing minutes. On one wall hung a photograph of Victor and Edwin standing beside a fishing boat, both smiling beneath baseball caps much too young for men already in their 60s. They caught absolutely nothing that day, Victor said. Noticing me looking at the picture, I laughed. Edwin told me they came home pretending the fish weren't biting. Victor smiled. He insisted the story sounded better than admitting we forgot the bait. For the first time in days, the heaviness inside my chest eased. Small memories have a way of reminding us that love existed long before betrayal ever arrived. Victor motioned toward a chair. Let's begin. I handed him Edwin's letter. He read it silently, before placing it carefully inside a leather folder. He wrote this exactly 3 weeks before he passed. I had no idea. He wanted you to live without fear. Victor folded his hands together. But he also wanted you protected if fear ever became necessary. He stood and walked toward a locked filing cabinet. After unlocking the top drawer, he removed a thick blue folder. My name appeared neatly typed across the front. Celeste Harrow. He returned to his desk. There are several documents inside. They're all legal. They're all valid. And every one of them was prepared at Edwin's request. I looked at the folder but didn't touch it. What kind of documents? The first concerns your home. My home? Victor nodded. The house you've lived in for 38 years. I thought everything transferred after Edwin died. It did. But probably not in the way you believe. He opened the folder. Instead of sliding papers toward me immediately, he explained patiently. After Edwin's diagnosis, we reviewed every asset. The house, investments, insurance, retirement accounts. He asked one question over and over. Victor looked directly at me. If something happens to me, can anyone pressure Celeste into giving away what keeps her safe? I felt my throat tighten. He really asked that? Many times. And every time my answer was the same. Victor turned one document toward me. No. I lowered my eyes to the page. Across the top appeared words I didn't fully understand. Below them, Edwin's signature. Victor's signature. Several official seals. This created a protective family trust. I frowned. What exactly does that mean? It means your home cannot simply be transferred because someone asks. It means major decisions require very specific legal conditions. It means no family member, not even Tristan, can pressure you into signing ownership away without several independent legal reviews. I stared at him. So, the house is protected, very carefully protected. A long silence followed. Then another thought occurred to me. If that's true, Victor finished the sentence. Why would anyone ask you to sign paperwork? Exactly. Why? He leaned back slowly. Because people often ask for signatures before understanding what those signatures can actually accomplish. I remembered Marin's words. Once she signs everything after the holidays, a chill moved through me. Victor reached for another document. This one is even more important. He placed it on the desk. Edwin had written something across the bottom margin in blue ink. Only show Celeste if she asks for help herself. I felt tears gathering again. Even in legal paperwork, Edwin had been thinking about preserving my independence. He loved you very much, Victor said quietly. I know. I just wish I could tell him that one more time. Victor waited respectfully before continuing. There's something else you need to know. What is it? About 4 months ago, he opened another section of the file. Someone contacted my office requesting copies of certain estate documents. My heart skipped. Who? Victor didn't answer immediately. Instead, he turned the visitor log toward me. One name had been highlighted. Simone Harrow. I stared at it for several long seconds. She came here? Yes. She scheduled an appointment. What did she want? Information. What kind? She said your family wanted to simplify future estate planning. I almost smiled. Not because it was amusing, because I had finally heard that word again. Simplify. Just like her text message after Christmas. We were just trying to keep things simple. Victor continued. I refuse to discuss anything without you present. What happened? She seemed disappointed. Did Tristan come with her? Victor slowly shook his head. No. That answer stayed with me. Either my son truly didn't know, or Simone had begun making plans on her own. Before I could ask another question, Victor's office phone rang. He glanced at the caller ID. His expression changed. He looked back at me. Interesting. What is it? It's your son. My heart began beating faster. Victor didn't answer immediately. Instead, he asked me one quiet question. Celeste, are you ready to hear what he believes he's calling about? Victor looked at the phone for another moment before pressing the speaker button. He didn't say a word. Neither did I. Victor? Tristan's voice came through the office. Speaking. Good morning. Good morning, Tristan. There was a brief pause. I hope I'm not calling at a bad time. Not at all. How can I help you? I watched Victor's expression carefully. He gave nothing away. Tristan cleared his throat. I wanted to ask a general question about my mother's estate. My mother's estate. Not my mother's well-being. Not my mother's Christmas. Victor remained calm. What specifically? We've been talking as a family. There it was again. We. And we think it's time to make things easier for Mom. The word easier sounded almost identical to Simone's favorite word. Simple. Convenient. Easier. Different words. The same idea. Victor folded his hands. What do you mean by easier? You know she's getting older. I lowered my eyes. 69. Yesterday I had been too emotional for Christmas dinner. Today I was suddenly too old to manage my own affairs. She shouldn't have to worry about maintaining that big house by herself. Victor asked another simple question. Has your mother told you she wants to sell it? No. Has she asked for legal assistance? No. Then why are you calling? A longer silence followed. Finally, Tristan answered. Simone and I just think planning ahead is the responsible thing to do. Victor's voice never changed. Planning ahead is always wise. I agree. But planning on someone else's behalf without their request is something very different. The line became quiet. I knew my son well enough to recognize what was happening. He wasn't used to people questioning his assumptions, especially not calmly. I understand, Tristan said. I was actually hoping to schedule a meeting. What kind of meeting? Just to review a few documents. There are some forms we'd like Mom to sign. My heartbeat slowed. Marin had been right. There really were documents. Victor glanced toward me but continued speaking naturally. What documents? Oh, nothing complicated. Mostly updates. Just routine paperwork. Routine. Another harmless word. I had begun noticing how often important things were hidden behind comforting language. Routine. Simple. Convenient. Easier. Words designed to make people stop asking questions. Victor opened the blue folder in front of him. His eyes moved quietly across one page before he spoke again. Have these documents already been prepared? Not yet. We're still gathering everything, so nothing has been drafted. Not officially. Victor nodded almost imperceptibly. I see. Then he asked the question that changed the entire conversation. Tristan, Yes? Does your mother know you're calling me today? Silence. Not 1 second. Several. Finally. No. I wanted to surprise her. Victor thanked him politely. We'll speak again if your mother requests a meeting. Of course. The call ended. Neither of us spoke for a while. Victor slowly placed the receiver back onto its cradle. I was hoping I was wrong. So was I. He removed his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. Your son may honestly believe he's helping. You think so? I do. And Simone? He looked directly at me. I think she's leading the conversation. That answer hurt. Not because it blamed Simone, because it reminded me that Tristan was allowing someone else to make decisions about his own mother. Victor closed the blue folder. There's one thing I need you to promise me. What is it? If anyone places papers in front of you. He waited until I met his eyes. Don't sign them. Not until you've brought them here. I promise. No matter who asks. I promise. Even Tristan. That one took longer. Eventually I nodded. Even Tristan. Victor smiled gently. Edwin would be proud of you. Those words nearly broke me. Not because I doubted Edwin's love. Because I had spent months believing I was becoming weaker. Instead, for the first time since his death, I felt stronger. Before I left, Victor handed me a business card. His direct phone number was written neatly across the back. Keep this with you. I will. If anything feels rushed, I'll call. If anyone pressures you, I'll call. If you're uncertain, I'll call. He smiled. Good. Outside, the winter air felt crisp against my face. The sky had finally cleared. Sunlight reflected across untouched snow, making everything seem brighter than it had only an hour before. I sat inside my car but didn't start the engine. Instead, I looked at my phone. 3 unread messages waited for me. One from Tristan, one from Simone, one from Marin. I opened Marin's first. It was only one sentence. Grandma, Mom keeps asking if anyone has talked to you today. I stared at the message. Not, how are you? Not, did you make it home safely? They wanted to know whether someone had reached me first, whether their timeline had changed, whether I knew something they hadn't planned for me to know. I finally started the engine. As I pulled out of the parking lot, my phone rang again. This time, it wasn't Tristan. It wasn't Simone. The caller ID displayed a name I hadn't expected to see. Fiona Carlisle, the manager at the bank where Edwin and I had kept our accounts for nearly 30 years. Something told me this call had nothing to do with holiday greetings. Fiona Carlisle sounded unusually serious. Mrs. Harrow? Yes, Fiona. I hope I'm not interrupting your morning. Not at all. There was a brief pause before she continued. I'd prefer not to discuss this over the phone. My heart skipped. Is something wrong? I believe there's something you should review regarding your accounts. Can you come by this afternoon? I'll be there. By 2 o'clock, I was sitting across from Fiona in the same office where Edwin and I had signed countless papers over the years. She greeted me with genuine warmth. I'm sorry for your loss, Celeste. Thank you. She placed a thin folder on the desk. I wasn't sure whether to call, but after a recent inquiry, I felt it was appropriate. A recent inquiry? She nodded. Someone requested information about accounts connected to your late husband's estate. I already knew the answer before she spoke the name, Simone Harrow. Fiona looked surprised. You already knew? I suspected. She folded her hands. To be clear, we released nothing. She wasn't authorized. Neither was anyone else. Relief washed over me. Edwin had chosen good people, people who respected rules instead of pressure. Fiona smiled kindly. Your husband organized everything very carefully. Yes. He also left written instructions. She slid one page toward me. At the bottom was Edwin's signature. One sentence caught my attention immediately. No account changes are to be discussed without my wife present. I closed my eyes for a moment. Even here, he had been protecting me. Not because he believed I was incapable, because he believed I deserved to be included. Fiona hesitated. May I give you one piece of personal advice? Of course. I've worked with families for nearly 25 years. I've seen grief. I've seen generosity. And I've seen people confuse access with entitlement. She looked at me gently. Never apologize for protecting what your husband worked a lifetime to build. Those words stayed with me long after I left the bank. That Saturday afternoon, I drove to Tristan's house for the family meeting. For the first time in months, I wasn't anxious. I wasn't angry. I was simply prepared. Victor's business card rested inside my purse. Edwin's letter was folded beside it. When I walked to the front door, I noticed something immediately. It wasn't locked. Tristan opened it before I could knock. Mom, his smile looked uncertain. I'm glad you came. So am I. Inside, Simone greeted me with perfect politeness. Celeste, would you like some coffee? No, thank you. Everyone sat around the dining table, the same table I had never reached on Christmas Eve. After a few minutes of small talk, Simone placed a folder in front of me. We've been thinking about your future. I looked at the folder but didn't touch it. What kind of future? Just some routine paperwork. There was that word again, routine. She smiled reassuringly. This would make everything much easier. I met her eyes. For whom? The room became quiet. Simone's smile faded just slightly. For everyone. I nodded. I see. Tristan leaned forward. It's only so we can help if anything ever happens. I appreciate the concern. I rested one hand on the unopened folder. Before I sign anything. Simone interrupted gently. Oh, it's nothing complicated. I know. I smiled. That's exactly why my attorney will review it first. No one spoke. I watched surprise move across Simone's face. Then confusion. Then something very close to panic. You have an attorney? She asked. I do. Victor Ellery has been advising me. For the first time since I'd known her, Simone completely lost control of her expression. Tristan looked back and forth between us. Victor? He knows about this? He knows everything he needs to know. Silence settled over the table. No one reached for the folder again. No one asked me to sign. No one mentioned simplifying anything. The meeting ended less than 15 minutes later. As I walked toward my car, Marin ran after me. She wrapped her arms around me tightly. I'm sorry, Grandma. I kissed the top of her head. You never have to apologize for someone else's choices. I love you. I love you too. She smiled through tears. Will you still come next Christmas? I looked back at the house, then down at my granddaughter. Only if every door is open. She nodded. I'll make sure it is. A year has passed since that Christmas. Life looks different now. I spend more time with people who are happy to see me, instead of people who simply expect me to be available. Victor still checks in from time to time. Fiona always greets me by name whenever I visit the bank. Marin comes over almost every Saturday to paint in the sunroom Edwin built years ago. As for Tristan, our relationship is healing slowly. Trust, once broken, isn't rebuilt by promises. It's rebuilt by choices. And choices take time. As for Simone, I no longer spend my energy trying to change her. Some people teach us how to love. Others teach us where to place healthy boundaries. Both lessons are valuable. This Christmas, I hosted dinner in my own home. Not because tradition demanded it, because peace had finally returned. As everyone gathered around the table, I looked at the empty chair where Edwin used to sit. For the first time since losing him, the emptiness no longer felt unbearable. It felt grateful. Grateful for the years we shared. Grateful for the wisdom he left behind. Grateful that he had taught me one final lesson without ever saying the words aloud. Family is never defined by the people who can lock you out. It's defined by the people who would never let you stand outside the door. And this time, when I looked around my table, every seat belonged to someone who truly wanted me there. Looking back, I realized the most painful part wasn't standing outside a locked dining room on Christmas Eve. It was believing that keeping the peace meant accepting disrespect. Edwin taught me that kindness should never require surrendering your dignity, and love should never ask you to ignore the truth. If my story leaves you with one lesson, let it be this. Never chase a seat at a table where your presence isn't valued, because the people who truly love you will never lock the door in the first place.